Hi everyone, welcome to the session of our web series Fire Chat with Champions, in which we interview global business leaders, asking them crowdsourced questions relevant to biggest challenge we face today, COVID-19, and its impact on various aspects of businesses and the way we can steer ourselves in current uncertainties. Today we have a special guest with us, Yeen. Yeen is the founder and CEO of the Center for Research, Advisory and Technology, CREATE, and was named a Young Global Leader by World Economic Forum in 2016. She was a member of the Entrepreneurial Development Council of the Ministry of Education, Malaysia. In 2015, she was invited, none other than the President Barack Obama, as a mentor for Youth of Southeast Asia. And that was known as a Youth Southeast Asian Leadership Initiative, YSEALI. As someone who has observed activities of Yeen for a long time, I can say she is very passionate about creating a better society. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change one wishes to see. Yeen lives by this belief. Thanks, Yeen, for accepting our invitation. I would request you to let our viewers know a bit more about you and your current interests and activities.
Hi, Deepak, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Well, I'm very privileged to, and very honored to share my views with you regarding startups or industries during this COVID outbreak, and also perhaps some of my thoughts on where will things go post-COVID and what's actually happening in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, and from my understanding of what's happening in China since what have been happening in China since January, and a few of the donation drive and initiative that I started. In January, on the first day of Chinese New Year, to help Wuhan, and then now we have shifted our focus to help medical frontliners in Malaysia, and also some of the very underprivileged communities or marginalized communities who have been struggling daily because of this outbreak and the entire global lockdown, that I would say. Yeah, so those are among the few things that I have been doing over the last few months, and yeah, I'll be very happy to share my thoughts with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Yeen. This brings us to our first question. Now, as you know, COVID is unlike anything world has seen so far, at least our generation, and things would be very, very different post-COVID. You being someone who has been advising and working on issues related to women and youth empowerment, and as entrepreneurship is key for the same, what will be the impact of COVID on startup ecosystem and subsequent economic downturn according to you?
Well, you see, as we all know that COVID-19 continues to spread rapidly around the world, and as of today, almost every country has reported cases. But again, the burden is somehow asymmetrically distributed around the world. So I would say that a lot have changed over the last month for many countries, but I would say that from my own personal perspective, a lot have actually changed since January, because I was following very closely what happened in Wuhan, in the entire China, and how this coronavirus turned COVID-19 now being labeled by WHO as a pandemic. And I would say that if we only view things as things have changed over the last 1 month and over this month and the next, I think we are really understating the reality and the extent of the impact of COVID-19, not only to national healthcare or public healthcare systems, but also to economic systems around the world, and also a lot of the social contract around the world, or a national or regional social contract that we have within our society. And I would say that since perhaps 3 to 4 weeks ago, in the most literal sense, is that what we have seen is that the world has somehow stopped as everyone watched with a lot of disbelief that this pandemic spread. It's reached across every corner of the globe. Of course, when in January, when Wuhan first had the outbreak, there were a lot of finger pointing towards China, right? If you remember that. And then subsequently, over the last 2 weeks, perhaps, more and more revelation actually come from, and where it actually. So of course, this is a separate debate altogether. But I would say that as a result of all these preventive measures that we have experienced, whether it's you or me or all our other friends from other parts of the world, is that measures taken or preventive measures undertaken by governments worldwide to control the pandemic have somehow have a direct impact on big businesses, small businesses, startups, individual entrepreneurs, and also people in the social sector, startup sector, have somehow we become the most vulnerable groups that we think we have been directly affected by these measures, while we have forgotten that, in fact, the most vulnerable group of people who are fighting this pandemic every day could be actually the medical frontliners who are risking their life, saving lives. There are family members of patients who are now stuck at the hospital, or family members of those who have actually lost their loved ones due to this pandemic. If you remember how China, Wuhan, treated patients who actually didn't make it, those people, the deceased patients, they did not have a funeral. Family members did not get to see their loved ones before the hospital or the government took the body away and cremated them. I think somehow they are the forgotten lot when societies at large or the noise at large have so much focus on how businesses have been affected, how my business is not going to sail through, how much unemployment we are creating out of this pandemic. So somehow the debate has been health risk versus economic risk, social risk. So it's really interesting to see how conversation and narratives have been going on around the world. And then I begin to sit back and think, what matters most to mankind? Is it businesses? Is it all about money and economy? We have also forgotten, and I think somehow it's amazing, is that the environment and the Mother Earth actually reminded us that this pandemic is to actually allow humans to take a break, for the earth to take a break and to recover. And that's somehow this conversation, it's somehow missing the limelight when it should be. And I think there are just too much conversation about money, capital, and then of course with the oil crisis, the oil price and all that. So more and more interest and conversation surround about money. It's all about money and how we're going to survive. And I think this could be one of the fundamental problems that we humans somehow to realize that we need to relook at the entire meaning of life. Why are we here on earth? Of course, money is important. Of course, economy is important. Of course, capital market is very important to keep businesses and industries going and the world going. But without life, without environment, without healthy Mother Earth, all this would not exist. Well, I'm not trying to divert the entire conversation of today from taking away the focus on startups, entrepreneurship, and businesses to something different. But I think as entrepreneurs, as change makers ourselves, we need to strike a balance between health risk, social risk, environmental risk, and also economic risk. And I think I really want to address all of this moving forward in every conversation that we have, because if our focus is only about money and about the markets, we are not going to be sustainable for a very long time.
Yeen, actually, the idea of this talk with the stakeholders like you is that we want to listen to all passionate voices. And I love the perspective you brought in. So startup is not about just making money. They should understand that it is also about compassion. Mother Earth, the well-being of the people is of paramount importance. Money can come later. So thank you for sharing such an awesome ideas, and I welcome that. There is no diversion of the talk. We love to hear what you say. So now that brings me to a second question. So COVID is already impacting different sectors and countries differently. So as you have mentioned, the Chinese, it impacted differently. It has impacted South Korea differently, Singapore, India, Italy. So you find, and even US, you find it is impacting different countries, whether they are developed, underdeveloped, right? And different phases. So it is impacting different countries differently. What it has come as a part of opportunity for social enterprises, just like you and me who believe that the world's good is good for the business as well, right? It has impacted negatively those businesses which were, as you rightly said, that just the money-making businesses, right? And which were compromising the world. For example, when we talk about the manufacturing, the type of pollution those manufacturing units were creating, right? The globalization, though it looks good, but we are seeing that now the focus is started on deglobalization because, my food, which is in US, is not going to help me today because ships are not moving, right? So I need to grow my food in India. So the deglobalization is also coming forth. So there are a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts where some things have been impacted negatively, something has been impacted positively. I would like to have your view, especially with your understanding of Southeast Asia and China, typically the relationship of China with Southeast Asia, that how COVID would be impacting the overall economy, right? And by economy, I'm not just talking about the businesses per se. I'm saying about the economy is also having a majority stake of well-being of the people. So how do you see it emerging in Southeast Asia and the impact of COVID on the overall economy and the social well-being of people in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think first and foremost, what we are seeing is something very straightforward, which is the decline in productivity. I think, although we are in this digital age, and most of the newly formed businesses and startups in particular have been, right from day one, have been adopting a very lean organization structure, which means that you see a lot of cross-functional roles. And with facilities being shut down, for example, offices shut down, people cannot go to work, people have to work from home, I would say that even a small decrease in employees' productivity can actually build up very serious problems for businesses. Well, there are people who actually work non-stop, where we say work from home, because working from home means you work day and night and then over weekends and we don't stop. But you also cannot deny the fact that there are also many people who actually take advantage of the working from home and they barely work. That's how I put it. It's like, imagine this. A professional working mom, a working mother, in the past, before the lockdown, she sent the children to childcare or to the in-laws of, to somewhere. And there she goes off to work. During this lockdown, what happened? Kids stay at home. When kids stay at home, when schools conduct e-learning, the mother have to help the children to prepare for schoolwork, right? So it's amazing to see the scenario whereby teachers become influencer online or celebrity online. Parents become teachers at home. In the past, when children play with the phone, your mom will say, put the phone down, do your work. If you go online too much, your teacher will used to tell you, stop going online, do your work. Today, your mother will say, focus on the screen. So you see, so the entire shift of scenario, right? So when things like that change, when circumstances change, so when parents, whether it's mother or father, having to put an effort into the child's learning at home, that would mean that it has also taken some of their attention and time from doing their work from home. And that affects productivity. But there's nothing wrong with it, because children need necessary guidance to carry on with the e-learning in school. At the same time, companies would expect parents to also work from home. Wow. So this is actually a dilemma that's experiencing by a lot of working parents today. They try very hard to also do their work, but somehow the kids will be using their laptop in the morning when kids are learning from teachers at home, and then they can't do their work until maybe afternoon and evening. So therefore, you see working parents working around the clock. In the morning, they prepare their kids for study, they sit down with their kids for study, and then they have to cook, because in the past, they don't have to cook for lunch and dinner, and suddenly they have to make meals to feed everybody. So you see mothers especially becoming a superwoman working around the clock. So she has to become a working mom, and then she has to take off the working mom hat, and she becomes a mom, she becomes a chef, she runs the household. So this entire cycle, although it's necessary, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, it's somehow affecting productivity in businesses, whether it's for startups or for large organizations. All right? Okay. So during these tough times, it's like what we see is that we also require additional time and attention on societal needs, which I've earlier said, because then that is the only way for us to keep up with the global reactions and to monitor possible developments of the virus around the proximity. And when a person needs to attend to household concerns, as I said earlier, cutting down productivity, spreading across weeks and then possibility months, and so this is like the first point that I made earlier. In terms of market, I would like to touch a little bit about the market, especially within the startup sector. Is that according to one of the survey report that I read, is that 74% of startups actually saw their revenue declining or decline since the beginning of the crisis. I think the beginning of this crisis over here would mean that beginning of March. But if you want to talk about the decline of revenue for startup in January, the amount is going to be way higher. But I think the survey report not include the outbreak in China. So, and what the survey have actually seen is that the most common type of change in revenue is actually relatively modest. However, what we saw is that 60% of startups actually saw their revenue drop by more than 80%. So 74% of startups across the board saw a decline in revenue, but 60% saw a drop for more than 80%. And this is very serious because, and they actually said that one of the main reasons for the drop in revenue come from the effect of the crisis on industries those startups actually serve. So it comes from their clients. And it is like a cascading effect that affect everybody down the pyramid system. And for example, that would also mean that 3/4 of startup work industries severely affected by this COVID-19 crisis. And what you have seen is that somehow a small minority of companies are actually experiencing growth during this COVID-19. And what we have seen is that approximately 12% of startups have actually seen their revenue increasing by 10% or more since the beginning of the crisis. Because like in Chinese, we always say that every crisis actually brings about an opportunity. So if you look at startups who focus on a B2B business, they will see a decline. Right. Because B2B means normally a startup will serve a bigger company. And when industries lock down, they are actually the first one being hit. But if you look at startups who are actually B2C, they actually are experiencing growth of up to 3 times. And that's something very interesting. So let me just give you an example. In Malaysia, some of the food delivery business startups have been struggling since day one, and they have been burning and making losses over the last 2 years. Suddenly, with the lockdown, everybody is having good business. So this is just a very small example of a food delivery business, because when people cannot go out, courier services, last mile delivery, everything suddenly works. Everybody is prospering. However, if you look at restaurant, hotel businesses, you look at across a lot of other industries who have a high level of physical contact, they're going to be dead. Cinemas are going to be dead. Karaoke is going to be dead. Tuition centers, training centers, conference organizers, those, they are not going to go anywhere moving forward. I think they are going to be affected over the next 6 months to a year, conservatively speaking. And if you look at the cases in China, I think in end February, you see cinemas closing down, going bankrupt. You see karaokes, the proper karaokes, the family karaokes, they are closing down because they just cannot cope with the overhead. In letting people go by paying people half pay, 20% pay, minimum wage, but the rental goes on. And there are a lot of fixed overhead that cannot be cut. And the only thing that they could do is to close down the business. And I'm talking about established businesses who have got hundreds of millions of turnover per year, and they are closing down.
Right.
So if I may also continue to talk about China and Southeast Asia. So for China and Southeast Asia, I would like to touch on the supply chain breakdown. Okay, so with the global commerce community being connected than ever before, that as we all know, is that a lot of companies are actually facing problems. And when I use the word a lot of companies, I mean DIY shops, for example, who actually import almost all their products from China and sell at a very low rate to communities. They have not gotten their supplies to come to Malaysia, so they have nothing to sell, even though they can open their shop. That's one. Number two, very simple example. You have traders who are trading noodles, or buckwheat noodles, whom in the past they import from China. During the lockdown in China, over 76 days in Wuhan, that would be January until like almost March, nothing goes out. They run out of stock to sell. So although lockdown, we call it the movement, we call it MCO, movement control order in Malaysia, started in middle of March. Some of the shops, of the traders and dealers have got nothing to sell since beginning of March because the supply chain have broken down. Okay, so according to another 94% components of the supply chain linked to the center of the COVID-19 pandemic. What does that mean is that the problem in this actually are turning out to be a huge challenge for startups within the wide range of sectors, be it healthcare and technology. Because as the matter gets out of control for entrepreneurs or big businesses and even small businesses, the dysfunctionality of the supply chain is actually raising a lot of concern. How do we survive in the pandemic? And as we all know that China is one of the largest and the biggest market for industrial goods because of the cost effectiveness, because of its geographical location around the world, the practice of quarantine within this region, whether it's China or Southeast Asia, is actually impacting businesses across the globe. And that's when the conversation that we had earlier is that if we talk about food supply chain, we talk about food security, suddenly globalization doesn't work. We need to talk about regionalization and nationalization. We need to make sure that within our country, we have enough rice, we have enough vegetables, we have enough fruits, we have poultry. And I think this is actually a concern that people like you and me have been talking about over the years, but it fell on deaf ears, right? We talk so much about food security within the country, but everybody says it's cheaper to import. So the cheaper to import may not work today because there's nothing for you to import. Not because China stopped producing, but because of the hiccups in logistics, because of the lockdown, the quarantine, and supplies or goods. These would be medical supplies that need to get out of China to save life across the world instead of other things. And for many countries, when logistics are not being shut down, the priority is always given to medical supplies. And that would mean that although we do not lock down our logistic chain and supply chain, we may still be able to import and export other goods, but they get stuck. It takes longer, it takes double and triple the time for you to receive perhaps a cargo worth of food. In the past, you may only take 10 days from China to Malaysia, but today, if your item or your size is not being listed under the priority essential list, you wait. So either you don't get to load your cargo on the ship to be sent to Malaysia, or when the ship actually arrives at the port in Malaysia, you queue. So this is what I call a breakdown, a hiccup. And that actually means that many people are stuck because the entire timeline of their logistics and the supply chain, the timing has just gone haywire overnight. So I would say that this is actually the breakdown of global commerce from the pandemic. And besides that, so let me go back to startups, is that for startups that are somehow associated with a third-party firms for regulatory, for industrial, and even legal operations, they are also facing delays and challenges because governments around the world, or I would say government of Malaysia, we have essential services who are being allowed to operate. And if your business falls under non-essential services, you cannot operate. So if you're a startup, and when you are in need of such regulatory services, legal operations, or you need to get paperwork done, it can be done. It's just going to be slower. And as we all know that in business, time is money. Efficiency is everything, productivity is everything. So the soft supply chain, which also includes outsourcing of essential tasks like customer service, it's not working. Data acquisition, most likely is not working. And a lot of other administrative functions are actually another side of vulnerabilities of startup that is creating the breakdown of, or I would say the reduction of productivity in the entire business operation and business ecosystem that we are seeing today. But of course, most of the startups have relatively undiversified revenue flows, meaning to say the supply chain will then somehow be presenting as one of the biggest challenge in terms of both goods and services. Because just now, I remember I mentioned that a lot of startups actually have a very lean organization structure, and that would mean that many times a lot of startups actually outsource a lot of services, while within internally they have a business operation whereby everybody is multitasking. So when you are multitasking, you may not be a specialist of something, but you are a generalist of everything. And key essential services like regulatory, accounting, maybe your budgeting, or maybe your payment system, all those are actually being outsourced. And with the lockdown, the outsourced services cannot be conducted, and therefore it's impacting your business. So all these obstacles actually are creating problems like meeting deadlines, like all of us, deadline is like everything. And orders, can you fulfill your orders? Can you fulfill orders to be delivered to clients? This kind of delay, although your clients may understand for 1 week, for 2 weeks, but if you keep delaying your orders, although it's not your fault, but it's circumstantial, the impact of the goodwill will run as well. You will lose your goodwill eventually. So I think those are challenges that startup owners are facing and besides struggling to survive in terms of the drop of stock revenue, all these operational challenges are actually something that all startup owners and startup teams are braving every day.
Perfect. As articulate as ever, I can, because of paucity of time, that was a challenge. Otherwise, I can keep on listening to you, right, for hours and hours, believe me, right, very passionate, very clearly explained, and your examples are always just mind-blowing. Thanks for that. So that brings us to the last question. It is a little bit personal, right? So that COVID is not just a health issue, but it is also a personal crisis for a lot of us, right? And when I know of late you have been cooking a lot and learning a lot of things. I can see beautiful dishes you are cooking on your Facebook page. So I would like to take it a little bit further to understand from you how you yourself are coping up with COVID and what you are doing to emerge better version of yourself once the COVID is over.
Well, to be brutally honest with you, I started the lockdown after Chinese New Year. Because remember I shared with you on the first day of Chinese New Year in January, I started the donation drive for Wuhan simply because my ancestors are from Wuhan. I came back from Wuhan on the 16th of January. And by the 23rd or the 21st of January, I know the situation is not going to be rosy for the rest of the world. Although the center of the epidemic back then seems like it is only focusing on Wuhan, and therefore people call it the Wuhan coronavirus, But then through my very close conversation and interaction with friends in Wuhan and hospital professionals, I know the impact of this, and I know eventually or sooner or later it's going to in fact impact the entire world. So therefore, for my own office, my own company, we have been working from home since Chinese New Year. Since after Chinese New Year, we have not been operating from the office. we have been working remotely. I would say that's number one. So I am very used to working from home right now. And of course, the use of technology, internet data become one of our essential. I mean, internet data, it's just as important as our electricity and food on the table every day. And because we are in the public policy consulting and international consulting business, we have been affected very badly at the beginning of it, because we do a lot of work in China. So when China locked down, nothing happens. So then we focus on our operation in Malaysia and building up more business opportunity and projects moving forward for Malaysia. So that's one thing. But since January, I have started a donation drive called Ops Harapan to assist medical frontliners in China, in Wuhan. And in March, we shift our focus to. So those have been the things that, apart from work, from home, so our civil society team have also been working very hard remotely from home to procure supplies from China. We are also, at the business level, we are also securing and procuring medical supplies and to assist foreign governments around the world. So I would say that we have been quite agile during this time, although it has been very tough for many, but for a lot of people. But I would say that because perhaps because we started the work from home policy in January, so our team have actually gotten used to it, and we passed the learning phase already. That's perhaps great. Many organizations need maybe a week or two to adjust themselves, right? They need to adjust themselves to see how to work from home and how to operate. But because we started early, so we are used to it. So now we were wondering, why do we need office moving forward? And I think this kind of thought that I have will not only be me thinking like that. I think moving forward, companies will then realize that I don't need so many people in the office. And what does that mean? I think the implication will be the property sector will be affected, because let me just give you an example, something that I've been thinking. You see, around the world, properties or studio apartments or Soho apartments in the city center have been very expensive, right? Because people want to stay near the city for them for accessibility to go to work and offices. But after this entire exercise of global lockdown, people will then realize that they can actually work from anywhere. You can actually live in the village up in the mountains and you can still do your work for New York. So then that will also mean that there will be less people wanting to live in the city moving forward, perhaps, because if we can do exactly the same thing by getting an apartment, whether it's renting or buying somewhere cheaper outside of the city center, that would also mean that it's going to somehow have an effect on property prices in the city center. I think that we may see that trend moving forward, and that's number one. Number two, office spaces. I would think that during this pandemic, you will see companies closing down, people losing jobs. You will likely see maybe up to 20% of unemployment rate in a lot of countries. And that would mean that corporate premises will also scale down and become smaller. And that would mean that commercial floor space you will see like more supply than demand in the future, because less people need to go to office, less people want to work physically. Everybody think that working remotely can just be as efficient. Because you see, we are very adaptive somehow. Right. We may feel that it's difficult to change. Nobody like the change. Once we get used to the tempo, we are okay. And I think that's the built-in agility and flexibility that we as human beings have. So I think those could be the impact that we will be seeing moving forward. Property sector, so then so those will be the traditional industry or another post-COVID. And then post-COVID, we will also be seeing that a lot of startup businesses, especially those who are focusing on technology, focusing on B2C, very personalized services, I think they will be able to thrive.
Perfect. Thanks, Insin, for as usual, always a very, very highly articulated and interesting discussion.
Yeah, sorry, I just have too much to share with you.
Yeah, no issues. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure talking to you as always. Loved, as I said, that I can keep on listening to you for hours, but because we'll be putting this, so we have some restriction of time of this video. So thanks a lot. Let's keep in touch. Stay safe, and thanks from the world for doing all the great things you are doing on a humanitarian level. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Bye. Take care.
Take care.